Uh, Hi guys. Thanks for joining in this session. We have a very interesting topic here today, speaking on Agritech ecosystem and what's happening lately. And we couldn't think of anyone else, but an authority on the subject we have today. I welcome Hemendra Mathur. Hi, Hemendra.
Hi, Yagnesh. Thanks very much for having me this morning. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Hemendra, for joining us and making time. Just as an introduction, guys, Hemendra doesn't need too much introduction in this space, but just wanted to introduce you to everyone else. Hemendra has 23 years of experience in venture capital, private equity, management consulting, and investment banking. He has also invested in various early stage agri-tech and mid-sized companies in the agriculture supply chain. He's also been an investor, mentor, and a board member in many of the food and agri-tech startups working in the innovation areas such as agri-inputs, market linkages, food nutrition, value chain financing. And he's currently a venture partner with Bharat Innovation Fund, which has been investing in early stage deep tech startups across sectors. Hemendra is also a co-founder of ThinkAg, a platform for accelerating the adoption of innovations in agriculture space. So, as you can see, we definitely have a whole 360-degree kind of a view that Hemendra has on the sector. So, we just thought we'll take this up today's discussion. So, Hemendra, a few things here to kind of kick off. Uh, I'm sure post-COVID, things have changed a lot for other sectors, but also for agri-tech as well, both at micro and macro level. So, would like to first know what are those significant changes that you have seen happening post the lockdown, and some of them have continued, some of them have been new. So, can you take us through a little bit about what changes are you seeing in the agri-tech ecosystem right now?
Thanks, Yagnesh. Of course, many things have changed since lockdown, and this lockdown couldn't have happened at a worse time from agriculture perspective because this is the season where the Rabi harvest is happening. There's more than 150 million tons of food grain alone which is getting harvested, and then the multiple horticultural crops like mangoes, grapes, oranges, capsicum, stuff like that. Which need to be harvested, tomatoes, etc. And at the same time, we have to prepare ourselves for Kharif sowing, which is going to start in few weeks, and that's also a very important crop for India, where most of the rice is grown, right? So I think it's an extremely critical and sensitive point from agriculture perspective. All I can say that agri-tech has played a key role, post lockdown in streamlining the whole food and agri supply chain. So, for example, connecting farmers to the markets. A lot of farmers were stuck with the stock at the farm. Mandis were not opening, and they needed an avenue to sell, right?
Yeah.
So I think multiple startups, who were connecting, farmers with, let's say, Kirana stores. Kirana saw a huge, bump in demand. So startups like Jumbo Tail, Shop Kirana, Super Shop, they played a very important role in building that, supply, this upsurge in demand. The multiple startups on the fresh produce side, like Ninja Cart, Waypool, Grow Farm, Agrowaves, etc., who also pivoted the model in terms of sourcing directly from farmers and also enabling deliveries to the consumer. Most of them are like B2B startups, typically selling to institutional clients, retail clients, or HoReCa clients. But in the hour of crisis, they pivoted to become more B2C, so that the last mile challenge, which is coming and still there, it's not fully resolved. They have been able to solve it. Likewise, if you look at Kharif sowing, which is also very important, and initially agri input was not part of the essential commodities, and we kind of made multiple representation to the government. They were pretty responsive, and it was included in essential commodities. But there were a lot of challenges in making the products available to farmers, and essentially seeds and fertilizer are very important. And if you delay your sowing by a couple of weeks, and if you don't get the right input, then it can be very fatal for the crop, right? So again, multiple startups offering in multiple geographies like Soft Agrostar, Big Heart, Gramophone, Behtar Zindagi, Unnati, E-Fasal. I think they played a very important role in enabling the excess of inputs which is needed for the farmers. I won't say we have solved for everything, but I think it's good to see entrepreneurs pivoting model, going out of the way, so that we don't get into a situation where product is getting spoiled at the farm gate and farmers don't have inputs to sow for the next crop. At this, and one more point I want to mention, a lot of data startups. So if you look at the best estimate which have come around harvest of crops in this period, have come from satellite imagery. They're more accurate, they're more timely. So there was a lot of
Hmm.
confusion. What is getting harvested where? I think few startups done a great job in figuring that out through imagery uh, on a, let's say, weekly basis, etc. And I think we should use more of these tools which are available at hand for future monitoring as well.
Sure.
And of course, few startups on the warehousing side, cold chain side, I think they also played a very important role in making sure that the product is is not lying on the field, and few startups on the financing side are enabling post harvest finance, etc. So I think bunch of initiatives. Overall, I'm very happy to see this kind of momentum going on, and we need this
Yeah.
momentum to go on at least for a few more weeks.
Yeah. No, I think you touched upon it well. I mean, we've seen a lot of changes happening. Just to share our experience at 100x, we were kind of, I don't know whether it's exact timing, but we had a startup invested called FNV Farms, and they literally, I was telling you about it, like, their revenues, they directly supply to home and a B2C model. They're also pivoting a little bit to the B2B as well parallelly. They've seen their revenues jump like almost 10x in the last 2 months. So yeah, I mean, a lot of startups have now discovered the whole B2C model, going online, using data science to do price prediction and then locking in the clients. So I think we are seeing those kind of innovations really happening with the with the advent of technology and digitization. So just a little bit to touch upon, are you seeing some of the trends of new startups using digitization, and as you rightly said, some of the names, is this a set to kind of really accentuate, and if so, what are you seeing at Bharat Innovation Fund? What kind of startups are you expecting now? And also, as an investor, what are the kind of trends do you see? Do you see more agri-tech startups mushrooming up, coming up with various technologies to kind of fix this whole broken supply chain? Or, I mean, how do you see the future for investing and funding startups, so to say?
Sure. So I think we already have more than 500 active agri-tech startups in India. And I would say almost 80% will fall in digital agriculture bucket. I think we have already done a phenomenal job in digitization of agri supply chain, be it satellite imagery application, be it use of spectrometry and mobile phones for quality assaying, be it dashboards for farm monitoring. So I think there are multiple applications, and I believe the trend is going to pick up. And there are multiple reasons for it. First and foremost, I think post COVID, what I believe, the consumer behavior will also undergo change, and they'll seek more accountability from food supply chain, which essentially means things like food safety and traceability will become more mainstream. This was like an optional stuff, probably except for some export linked supply chains or organic foods. These were
Okay.
common things, but I think across the value chain we are going to see more consumer driven supply chains which will demand more food safety traceability, and that's where the whole digitization piece becomes very critical. And thankfully there are bunch of startups who are doing it. Startups like Source Trace, TraceX have solutions around traceability. A startup like Agritech, Intalo Labs, MV Cube, Tech have done a phenomenal job in building a sort of a food safety oblique grading sorting platforms of sorts using digital tools. So I see a pickup on those kind of models for sure. Of course, as I said, the farm monitoring models from sowing to harvest will become more commonplace. Most of these clients were typically food processing companies and agri input companies. I see the given the in the context of situation, even government will start looking at these models more closely, and probably will start using some of these models for their own decision making and policy making perspective, right?
Mm.
In terms of investments, I can say that even in COVID time, there were like 5 or 6 agri-tech deals which have closed, and I am part of 4 more deals which are about to close in 1 more month. So,
Yeah,
so
that's
I
nice to
think,
hear.
yeah,
That's
that's
nice
a
to
good
hear.
one. Who would have expected Agritech to receive money in such situations? But I think more and more people are realizing, and I think one driving factor for this is that this is one of those sectors where you don't just see a scale opportunity, but you also see there's a lot of resilience. Of course, as an investor, you have to balance your portfolio, right? You don't want all the companies to go 40x, and suddenly the growth to come to a halt in these kind of situations. You need few companies which can probably grow 5x but are resilient in these kind of situations, right? And I think agri-tech is one of those sectors which offer that resilience. If it's
Yes.
there's not growth, there's also not. It's not that the investments are going bust. And given the size of opportunity, the size of a market is about $400 billion. It's a
Yes.
huge market.
Of
And if
course.
you agri-tech startups put together, I think we're not even a $1 billion top line market from an agri-tech perspective. Of course, the impact it has made is probably a few $1 billion. I won't deny that, but I think we are still tip of the iceberg. We want to see more penetration. Ultimately, it boils down to farmer adoption by corporates, value chain players. I think that adoption is going to go up. It used to be very hard sell for a lot of these digital tech startups to get into
Mm.
corporates, for example, right?
Mm.
I
Mm.
think that perspective is likely to change. That's one thing. And secondly, a lot of agri-tech models coming out of India is going to see a lot of global buy-in. I was on a call with startups from Southeast Asia last week, and it's quite surprising the problem they face when it comes to agriculture, very similar to the problem that we're trying to solve in India. So I think the globalization of digital agriculture is another big opportunity where India definitely has an edge. We are not a laggard. We are as good as anyone else. So yeah, I'm pretty optimistic
Yeah,
in
well, sometimes when you go to buy oranges, and nowadays you're doing that for your own household, when you don't find them, you start asking about the whole logistics, being breaking down. And so, touch upon a little bit about, how will logistics, we have these like right from the producer of farm, farmer to the end consumer, you have like 8, 10 kind of intermediaries in this whole chain. Uh, how do you see can you throw some light on the agri logistics space? I mean, particularly within the supply chain, exactly how will logistics play out? What kind of opportunity? Of course, we know all the challenges in the logistics, but how will the solutions play out? What kind of opportunities you see for startups dealing with agri logistics? And we have a couple of them in our portfolio as well, so it's in my interest also to ask you as well as other who are on the audience. So throw us a little light on the logistics piece. How do you see that panning out?
yeah. So logistics I'll divide into two parts. One is logistics for staples and non-perishables, and second is logistics for perishables, right? So if you look at staples and non-perishables, which is a huge sort of segment, wheat, rice, mustard, oilseed, etc. I think one thing which I want to see, and probably it will start happening soon, is a movement towards bulk handling, bulk storage, and bulk movement. Unfortunately, a lot of these staples are still transported in small volumes in gunny bags, in jute bags, and I don't think that's the efficient way of transportation. There's a lot of wastage, and there's a lot of additional cost without much of value addition. I think so that's movement is going to pick up, be it silos, be it large warehouses, be it use of railways and stuff like that. We are going to see a mega change in that perspective. For perishables in particular, of course, we need cold chain. I think we all know, but the cold chain is broken. We need to have integrated cold chain solution provider. That's extremely critical. And of course, we need some sort of primary processing oblique storage at the farm level, which is completely missing. And that has the ability to improve shelf life, etc. Because a lot of wastage happens right at the farm. So I think we want to see more pack houses, more micro cold storages, more solar powered cold storages, etc., which can And of course, a lot of primary processing, low capex primary processing, which can be packing, sorting, grading, etc., right at the farm level. On trucking perspective, the whole trucking industry is fragmented, and we haven't seen solution which are agriculture dedicated solution. So I think that's going to come up. We, of course, Rivigo is doing some bit of it. Blackbuck is doing some
Right.
bit of it. But I think we
Right.
need models like Aggregator, which is also your portfolio company in a way. I
Yes.
think solutions
Yes.
which are very agriculture focused. There's another one called Freight, which is doing some work dedicated in this space, which is essentially sort of solving for demand supply gaps, which we have seen in last few days. I think we need much more efficient models, and we also, the transportation of produce need a lot of scientific applications. Use of sensors, IoTs in monitoring, even the
Mm.
crate design. You'll be surprised, the crates which are, for example, apples coming from Himachal, they are a 20 kg box of wood has like 25 kgs pushed into it, and then that
Mm.
10-ton truck has a 15-ton load into it, which is not done. Half the product gets spoiled traveling from
Spot.
Himachal to Delhi. So I
Exactly.
think scientific applications where with designing of these solutions, and I'm sure digital tech has a role to play also in terms of GPS monitoring and sort of making sure the temperature and humidity levels don't change too much while the product is in transportation. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
another area where we're going to see a lot of
Yeah.
innovations.
I think, also one of the things that probably I'll touch up upon this and last, and then we'll see if there are questions coming up already. But you touched upon pre and post harvest financing. So I personally see a lot of innovation still come in this area where we talk about pre and post harvest financing, but I don't know if it's really there or who are the players who are actually pretty much revolutionizing this whole piece of pre as well as post harvest financing. You could see some agri fintech kind of startups who could come in, right? So I was just wondering about that and would love to hear your perspective about that.
Right. So that's a very important area. Thanks, you touched upon it. And we definitely want to see more fintech in agri-tech. I think that's still pretty much underserved area, even in the whole agri-tech universe. So if you talk about pre-harvest financing, so if you look at the priority sector lending, government mandated about $180 billion for priority sector lending in this financial year. That's a huge amount of money, right? I think the one reform that I want to see is to break this down into farmer personal loans and loans that which are going to be used for buying agri inputs. There is no such demarcation right now, and the reason I see
Mm.
that demarcation is critical because once you start tracking agri input sale, if you want to start digitizing that, because you are providing credit for it, most of the agri inputs in India about on credit, be it formal or informal. Once you have a good handle on that, you can actually build a very strong demand forecasting solution, very strong price forecasting solution. Abhi jo, the challenge that we see in the country, the onion prices have shot up by like 40%, and
Right.
prices crashed by 20%. That's happening because this demand supply asymmetry. If you start tracking agri inputs, the kind of seeds which are being applied, what locations, which farm, we will have a much better handle on our whole planning piece, right? So I think that's one thing we should try and change. I'm not saying reduce financing. We need more of financing, and power need a lot of support on the personal finance side also. So I'm not saying reducing it, but just bifurcate it so that it becomes more. It becomes a tool for decision making. And secondly, a lot of farmers don't have access to priority sector lending because they don't have the land records. Many of them are tenant farmers who don't have land ownership, right? So again, I think there's a role for a lot of changes out there in terms of building models for farmer KYC, for building models for risk assessment, for more value chain financing rather than collateral based financing. So I think again that is one area we need to think through. I think a lot of startups have been able to crack it, but the challenge comes when it comes to recovery, because recovery from each and every farmer becomes a bit of a challenge. I'm not saying farmer doesn't want to pay. The challenge is how do you build a scale? You can probably build this model for 10,000 farmers, but you want to scale it to a million farmers. How do you
Yes.
build recovery component? So again, role of e-natch, role of digital payments, and role of closed loop full stack models will become very important. On the post-harvest finance side, I think the post-harvest finance is of the order of 10-15 billion dollar. And if you look at the agricultural output value at the farm gate, it is about 250 to 70 to 75 billion dollars. So post-harvest finance is a small fraction of the potential which is available, right? So I think that is another area we need to think through. The reason it has not picked up because most of the farmers are smallholder farmers, and then they want liquidity immediately after harvest because they have to buy input for the next season. So I
Season.
think we need to again build models where we can give farmer liquidity, at the same time give them an option to store the products, and give them the flexibility to sell when they want to sell rather than do a stress selling. So we need more credit lines. We know we need more concessional finance. We need a lot of innovative financial products to around post harvest finance. Warehouse receipt financing is something which is picked up. I think that's another model to kind of think upon and sort of build further. And I think that's a great model to follow.
Sure. No, thanks. I mean, this is very important inputs from you, Hemendra. Really liked your inputs on this. And at this point, let me just ask, if there are any questions, and let's bring up those questions up and see if, there are any. So let me just see if there are any questions to be taken up. Um, we already had, Hemendra speak about agri logistics. So I think, yeah, that was well covered. We do have, a lot of room there in terms of improvement, in terms of the transparency in price, and digitization will bring in this transparency. I think those are the trends that we have to see. Traceability, transparency, digitization is what Hemendra spoke about. A lot of food safety issues will, probably change consumer behavior, which will drive the logistics startups to kind of, pull up their socks and kind of provide this end to end. So I think there's a lot of room here in terms of logistics supply chain to be improved. So that's one. Um, yeah, I mean the role of NBFCs and all of that coming up as post harvest financing, I think that needs to go up, right, as part of the thing. So I think that you did touch upon that as well. So while other questions do come in, Hemendra, just wanted to check, what's your sense on when is the normalcy expected? We know that we can't predict when all these things will kind of go away, and not really something which is not in our control is not something that we can do anything about. But expecting, let's say, some kind of flattening of the curve happening in a month or 45 days, do you see when should the sector kind of revive the whole? I mean, the whatever was there in terms of the supply chain further had challenges during these 2 months. So when do you see normalcy or near normalcy coming, post the flattening of the curve, or maybe even the cases going down? So, I mean, what's your sense there? Would like to hear that, I mean.
Yeah, so I think it's a very good question. I think it's in the overall context of the COVID. I think it's very important that we keep this sector alive. Otherwise, we are probably solving for COVID, but we are hitting another big challenge, which might be up our sleeves. So it's I think if you ask of normalcy, of course the food supply chain is broken, but things are changing for good every day. There's a lot of government buying happening, the which government does for a lot of commodities like wheat, rice, pulses, oilseed, which is MSP purchase. I think that is underway. Organizations like NIFED, Markfed, FCI are playing very important role out there because they are the bulk buyers of these products. But yeah, it has to pick up momentum. And I think it's a good time also for more private sector engagement on the purchase side. I think we need to push for that if you want to bring situation to normal. And the changes that I've seen in last few weeks are quite encouraging, where farmers is allowed to sell outside APMC mandi. Farmers can go to food processing companies, can go to cash and carry store, can even go to direct to consumers. So to me, I think these are great changes, and if I sincerely hope these changes are not temporary in the context of COVID. They extend beyond it. because these are the reforms we have been waiting for years and decades now, right? So I think if we adopt these changes, normalcy will return soon. And secondly, as I said, we need to make sure that we kind of hit our targets on kharif sowing, which is also very important, very time sensitive, and the fact that there's not enough farm labor, is kind of raising a lot of question. So another point I want to bring about is also the solution that we need around mechanization. I think unfortunately, from a farm perspective, we are still highly under mechanized country. And in India, we confuse mechanization with tractorization. We have many more tractors than we need in the country, right? But what essentially we need are small implements which can do multiple jobs, right? We need more remote irrigation controllers. We need more micro irrigation solutions. We need tools for urea deep placement, right? We need mechanical tools for harvesting, etc. So I think that's another area we should be thinking about.
Yeah.
There are multiple startups who have developed low cost, affordable solution for smallholder farmers. So I think we need to build upon that. Farming as a service is another area which I think has started but hasn't really picked up pace as much as we thought. So that's another area we should be thinking about how to solve for it, so that in these kind of
Yeah.
situations, we when there's not enough labor, how do we get to a
Yeah.
target level?
Yeah, I think you took up the question proactively, what Nitin actually asked. So Nitin actually asked how will farm mechanization, changes post COVID, which will be one of the hot subsectors in mechanization. So thanks for proactively doing that. Another question that is coming up is what changes do you see in the government funding to agriculture sector, maybe in the coming budget or maybe even before that. So any policy level kind of changes that you see in terms of funding to the sector as a whole?
Yeah, of course. I think this is a very important area. We've seen government funding going. Of course, there is direct benefit transfer scheme for farmers, which has an outlay of almost 75,000 to 80,000 crores. We have seen government funding going into a lot of irrigation projects. We have a Jal Shakti Ministry, which is doing a lot of work on water conservation for agriculture, etc. So, of course, there's funding going towards storage and stuff like that. What I want to see more is funding going towards promoting new age innovations, and I've been trying to make a case for it. Particularly, some sort of catalytic funding for agri-tech startups. Fortunately, the investor interest in the sector is going up, and we are seeing a lot of Series A, Series B, Series C, and Series D deals also now. But when it comes to the first check, when it comes to seed funding, of course, we have multiple incubators, and again, they're doing a great job. But we need much more than that. We need high velocity catalytic funds, which can, let's say, support 100 agri-tech startups in one go. I think
Hmm.
that is the kind of money that we need. And it's not too much of money. The first check that you need is typically between 25 lakhs to a crore. And I
Right.
always say it's possible that 50% of them may fail. Like the model that 100x is following, I think is a
Yes,
great model for agri-tech,
that's
because,
right.
these innovators struggle for months and years to get to a stage where they can commercialize. So if they have to fail, they should fail early. That's my theory. So then, you need this kind of funding. Of course, you need to have some hygiene factors in selecting these startups, but I think that's the time where government money or soft money or money coming from foundations or DFIs can play a very, very important role.
Yeah, I think you touched upon it. I think there's one question by Sudhanshu Rai that kind of poses this saying, can you throw some light on precision agri-tech startups? So, uh, any views on that? I mean, how do you see potential of precision agri startups? How do you see that coming around?
Yeah, so I think again there's a huge potential. Essentially, the ones who are into precision ag are uh, using multiple hardware devices like sensors, IoTs, etc., for capturing very, very precise data from the farm and trying to build application of inputs like fertilizers, water, pesticides, depending on the what data is coming from the farm, right? I would say a lot of precision ag in India still happened in farms which are more like medium to large. Let's say essentially more than 5 to 10 hectares, but not in farms which are more like 1 to 2 hectare, which is 85% of India's sort of whole farming landscape. So, so I think for precision ag to reach to masses or to the smallholder farmers, again we need we need layers in between which can make that happen. Making this innovation accessible to those smallholder farmers, right? And that's where the role of NGOs, role of FPOs, role of organizations which are working on the ground, right? Local panchayats, local agriculture universities come into play, who can become some sort of conduits for these innovations to reach to smallholder farmers. So yes, there's a huge potential because we are a resource-starved country. We are one of the most water-stressed countries in the world, right? And we still most of the irrigation is flood irrigation, right? So we
Right,
need to
that's
go
right.
to precision ag. We are putting much more urea than we need to. That's a complete waste of resources, and most of urea is
Resources.
getting, right. So I think as a concept, it's a great concept. India needs precision agriculture. Challenge is how you build interesting business models to become it. The adoption to go up multiple
Scalable
times
and
than what.
viable. That's right.
Yes.
That's right. So there's one question that has come in, and I'll quickly take this. Probably have a good 4 5 minutes to go, so we'll quickly capture a couple of questions. Uh, so somebody, Rohan Kulkarni, has asked, when you mean agri financing, the farmers are used to waivers, by the government and banks, and so how do you really tackle that piece? I mean, how does it become more efficient? More credit worthiness. I mean, farmers need to repay banks to be able to get that whole cycle moving. So how do you tackle that piece?
Very good question. Huh? Very good question. I'm look, when it comes to agriculture, policy is a very important plays a very important role, and policy again coming from the central government and the respective state government. So this whole question around loan waivers is a valid question, and I always say it's not that the farmer is asking for it. It's the government which is giving it, right? So to say that loan waiver, farmer is not disciplined enough to pay loans because there is loan waiver. It's not farmer's fault essentially. I think we need to accept it. If someone gives loan waiver, will be repay. So as simple as that. I think we need to bring in a policy perspective, and we need to bring in discipline at the policy level. Number one.
Right.
Number two, my experience, I can tell you, farmers which are borrowing from informal markets are paying interest rate of as much as 3 to 5% per month,
That's right.
right? If they get something which is like 0.5% to 1% per month, is going to change their farm economics completely, right? And I have seen, at least with some of the agri-tech startup and the NBFCs which are in agriculture value chain financing, the the repayment rate is more than 98%. So farmer does value finance which is available at the right time, right? And he knows that finance coming from these startups or these NBFCs is not going to be waived off. If something is going to be waived off, from the banks or the public banks. So to me, of course, loan waiver is a bit of a challenge, but and this is more of an empirical evidence because of my work in the rural areas and I visit villages very often. Majority of farmers are willing to repay their loans as long as it is available on time. Right? I think we
So
need to
what you're
build
saying is
mechanism
that,
for
what
efficient
you're saying is
onboarding.
more funding needs to take place through NBFCs or let's say fintech startups to kind of,
Yeah.
farmers, such that, loan waivers are not happening, or no default or no delinquencies happen. And you're saying repayment rate is 98%. That's fabulous. I mean, that's quite pleasantly shocking, surprising rather. So
Yeah. And another important thing is that these loans need to be not loans in cash. Loan need to be linked to the purchase of input so that you also can direct the usage of this that you're using. So there are multiple ways to for it. And I think again, role data startup, role of fintech startups is going to be very important. We
yeah,
have some, let's say, half a dozen startups who have proved it. Like among few thousand farmers, question is, can they take it to some million farmers? And that's where
Million farmers.
you
Yeah.
know these
I'll I'll take the last question for today, Hemendra. So what do you think is the COVID impact on agri export? Sandeep Tiwari is asking this question, and I think it's a very relevant one. So why don't you take this last one, and then probably we'll end this session, and probably another one, do some more ones later if there are more. But yeah, what your take on what's the COVID impact on agri export? What do you see the short term and the medium term trends here?
Right. So I think I want to make a couple of points here. So our agri exports typically range between 30 to 35 billion dollars per year, right? You know, categories like basmati rice, spices, shrimps, tea, etc. Large categories, and the government has set a target for almost $100 billion of agri exports out of India. I don't see that happening unless we sort out our value chain. I think we have the capacity to be exporter at least to South Asia, Southeast Asia, Middle East, and also parts of Europe. We are very, very competitive in these markets. The challenge is when you go to world market, there's a huge level of distrust of products coming out of India.
Mm,
Because what say that quality is X, when it reaches the destination market, the quality is Y, and that's what it is creating a lot of distrust. So
mm,
I think again, as we discussed earlier, there are very, very simple, cost-effective traceability solutions available. We need to use them, right? So it's not that that we are selling something which is not what we are claiming, right? So I think we need to build enough trust in the value chain for us to be a strategic exporter of a lot of these commodities. Second thing I want to say again, we need to focus on startups and innovations which are exclusive for export linked value chain, because they need to be very
mm,
different. We need to treat them
mm.
very different. We need very,
Absolutely.
that's where again all the solutions on bulk transportation, bulk storage, etc. comes into the picture. But I think it's a great timing. The reason I'm saying it, because in the last 3 weeks I've seen requests coming from Kuwait, Dubai, Singapore, London, places all over the place who are running short of food, and they are looking at India. Guys, you have production, you have supply, you have stocks available with you. Can you supply so and so product to us? So I think it's a great opportunity in short term, but to it become a long term strategic opportunity, we need to solving for the food supply chain. We need to make it more transparent, efficient, traceable, so that there is no distrust with the products coming out of India. So that's all I want to say
Yeah.
on the export opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think brilliant thoughts there. I mean, I just to kind of sum it up, I really feel hearing you, you know, we talking as 100x, we also look at edutech startups and other kind of sectors, and we find it so exciting. But listening to you, Hemendra, today really feels like, agritech is an area that we should deep dive further into, not just at the investment level, but look at more companies, look at kind of problems they're solving, and there are a huge amount of problems to solve, as you kind of touched upon in your comments. But there's a lot of scope here. So agritech certainly, I mean, should be one of the sectors that seed stage funds, VC funds should look at funding, because that's so like the funds have made a lot of difference in fintech in the past few years. I think agritech should be one of the most important sectors to watch out for. So, I mean, with this, thank you so much, Hemendra. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your very valuable inputs. Really appreciate you having us with 100x here. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Thanks, Yagnesh, and the entire 100x team for giving this opportunity. And yeah, look forward to doing some deals together in this
Absolutely.
space. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Look forward to that. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.